I used to think that conflict in relationships was a bad thing, but actually remembering my time in engineering school, I was always taught something different from that. Hi, I'm Diamond Davis, content creator, writer, and strategist, and a former engineer. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is where this metaphor came from. So in engineering school, I was taught something called a stress strain analysis. And essentially what it is for every single material, every single product or structure, like think bridges, buildings, you have to test the strain and stress that that thing can handle. So the load that it can take. You've probably seen those ASMR videos where it's like a pressing down on an object. So that is a part of testing an object's strength and durability. And the point of this test is so that you know the limits of that thing. You have to know the limit that, this pillar of a bridge can hold. You have to know the limit that this floor in a building can hold, or otherwise it might collapse. And that's why stress strain analysis are so important, because you know the limits, and then you can tweak the design. You can switch up the material. You can switch up the way that it is structured to be able to actually hold what you need it to and last. And relationships are no different. Pressure actually reveals a lot in our relationships. Communication patterns, where people might feel dysregulated, sensitivities, insecurities, worries, boundaries. It allows both parties in a relationship, platonic or not, to see really where the limits are and where the other person, really where both people need more support. And avoiding this tension in relationships doesn't create strength. It actually just makes them more fragile, because you're walking on eggshells. You're not being honest about how you're feeling. And ultimately, I feel like it can lead to the breakdown of the connection altogether. And one of the scariest things to me that I realized about this is when you are afraid to have conflict in your relationships, when you're afraid to say how you feel. And this happens a lot to people who are people pleasers or those that just like to keep the peace. And that used to be me. It leads to resentment. And resentment in relationships to me is so dangerous, because you're building up this poison. It's literally like a poison. And that resentment will start to build over and over and over again. And you'll continue to start seeing, I always say this, where your attention goes, energy goes. You're already starting to tell this story in your head. You're building this resentment. Nothing's being addressed. And so you're just building a longer and longer case and more points as to why this person is whatever it is that really annoys you or upsets you or violates your boundaries. But actually speaking on whatever's bothering you in a connection actually helps you to be able to repair the relationship, because you're just facing it head on. And whether their perspective of the thing is different or not, they're able to better see where you're coming from. And even just you saying it, it just feels like a total release. And for me personally, this was showing up, I realized, in my connections where I just did not want to have conflict. This was romantic and platonic. And I would just hold on to whatever I was feeling, and it was building up. And this was leading to me creating stories in my head. And also last year I had a conflict with somebody really close to me, and they just snapped. They snapped. And it was because they told me they had like years of resentment and things that were going unsaid with me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I the last to know? And of course you're feeling all these things because you've been building up this case for 2 years in your head, instead of just telling me how you were feeling in that moment, whether I wanted to hear it or not. And when you're afraid that a connection might end if there's conflict, you hold back. But really, it's healthy. It's needed. It's a part of a healthy relationship, and you owe it to yourself and to the other person to be honest about how you're feeling or what's upsetting you in a connection as soon as possible. Obviously, I'm not talking about complaining every day, but not being afraid to take things head on when you are feeling hurt, so that you can figure out a way to either, one or two things are going to happen. Either they're going to meet you halfway or change something so that you can feel more safe, or you realize that that person actually isn't aligned with you anymore, and maybe it's best you go your separate ways. But either way, you know that you are in a connection that is healthy for you and you feel supported. And after that conflict that I had with somebody last year and they finally told me how they were feeling, we actually are closer than ever, which to me kind of blew my mind because I still was in that mindset of like conflict equals loss. But it's actually a part of a healthy relationship and it builds that trust. And I've seen what resentment can do to people. I know some people living with a lot of resentment that won't be honest about how they're feeling with those around them. And it's not a good look. It's not healthy. And it leads to a lot of pain and loneliness. And the type of relationships that I want now in my life are strong relationships that can handle the stress and come out better for it because we know each other's limits. We know how to be there for each other. We know how to support one another, and not one where we have to hold back anything. So yeah, that was really the realization that I had, that stress and strain, conflict in relationships are not a bad thing. They actually show you where the relationship is vulnerable and how you can actually strengthen them and where there's room for improvement and more support and actually deepen that connection. Because when you know that you can be completely honest with somebody and say exactly how you're feeling or what's bothering you, it builds another layer of security, and that security is unmatched. I mean, nobody wants to have a ton of fragile relationships around them where they can't be honest with anybody in their circle. So yeah, that was really my realization. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you later. Bye.